So, looking at your natal chart from an EA perspective, part two. So, we went in my first video through the houses and what the underlying energy of the houses is from an EA perspective. And so, if you did not see that, I'm going to link that video below in the description. So, I would highly suggest to check that one out before you watch this one. So, this one is going to be a layering effect. So, in the first video, we just looked at the archetypes, the 6 bands of energy, the houses 1 through 12, and what they mean from an EA perspective. Now we're going to layer on top of it. So in the first video, Aries was representative of the first house. And so if you wanted to know how you innately projected to people close to you, well, what sign is on the cusp of the fourth house or first house? Sorry. And that would give you an indication of the energy that you innately project, right? So now we're going to go deeper into that. There's more steps to it and there's many layers, but we're just going to go the next step. So with that, let me share my screen here and we will walk through it. Okay, so here we are at the 12 houses that I covered in the first video. And so now the layering begins. And so we talked about in the first video, looking at this first house over here, that is innately you, right? So whatever sign is on the cusp for you would color how people see you that are closest to you. And so now there's going to be the layering. And so each one of these houses has a corresponding planet that owns it, right? So regardless of the signs on the cusps of your house, Aries energy, first house, also correlates with the planet of Mars, right? Mars is the ruler of Aries. And so it's important to know these symbols so that you can look them up. So that if you were trying to add layering to your first house, Mars would be important to find where that is in your chart by house and sign. And so we're just going to go around the symbols real quick in case you're unaware. So the second house is related to Venus. And Venus is a co-ruler, but we're going to get into that. And then the third house is Mercury, which is also a co-ruler. So that's the sign for Mercury. That's the sign for Venus. We have Mars, and then we have the moon related to the fourth house. We have the sun related to the fifth house. We have Mercury, which also rules the sixth house as well as the third. And then we have the sign of Venus again, which rules Taurus and Libra, second house and seventh house. And then we have Pluto, which is related to the eighth house. We have the symbol of Jupiter, which is related to the ninth house. We have Saturn, related to the 10th. We have Uranus, related to the 11th. If I can spell it right, Uranus. And then we have Neptune, which is related to the 12th. So these are all of the planets that are associated with these houses. So this is important in the layering. So we'll go back to the first house. And let's just say, instead of Aries, let's say you have a Gemini sign on your ascendant, right? So in the first video, Gemini is related to the third house, so communication, right? Think of all forms of communication. So people close to you, there would be some kind of uniqueness or some kind of instinctual quality of you related to Gemini. Maybe you're a teacher, maybe you talk a lot, maybe there could be symbols where you have trouble communicating, right? So something around communication for sure, right? And now the layering piece comes in. And so where is the ruler of Gemini in your chart? And so you would look for Mercury, right? Mercury is down here and it is associated with Gemini in the third house. So where is the symbol of Mercury in your natal chart? So let's just say for the example here that you have Mercury up in your 10th house. And with a Gemini ascendant, you would have a Pisces here in your midheaven on the top of your chart. So your Mercury in Pisces would then get added to the first house. So not only are you instinctually working through the energy of Gemini, you're also the 10th house and Pisces gets added to that first house. So people closest to you may know you in terms of how you're coming out in society. Maybe you're known in your career in some form or fashion, in some type of communication role, right? Could be part of this. And then in Pisces, well, Pisces could be spiritual, can be part of that. It could be a place that you contribute where there's no borders, right? Pisces is very much dreamy and emotional and artistic and creative. So that might be part of how people know you too. I mean, it could be a spiritual um, pursuit as part of your how people know you in society. But it's innate, it's first house, it gets pulled to the first house. So it's just how you innately project, right? Part of you wants to be seen out there, or your communication style wants to be known out in society. And so you'll instinctively navigate towards that. Then the next part of this layering is where is Mars, right? Because Mars is related to the first house. So again, it's going to tie into how you innately project. So let's put Mars over here in the sixth house. And with a Gemini ascendant, that would mean that Scorpio would be on the cusp of the sixth house. So let's say your Mars is in Scorpio in the sixth house. Well, now that gets dragged into the first house, right? So now there's another layer on top of it. So we're adding the sixth house of Virgo, which is strong analytical mind. People might know you with a strong analytical mind. People might know you as being hard on yourself, right? It's always purification and refinement with Virgo. Or you may be a healer in some form or fashion. That's Virgo territory, right? And then we add Scorpio. I need to be able to go in depth, or maybe I'm a natural psychologist, or maybe I just naturally call to me experiences that are in depth, that allow me to purify, that allow me to come out in society and be of service, right? That can be how we can kind of encapsulate all of this energy. And then the last part of this is, okay, well, where is the sign of Aries in this chart? And so Aries with a Gemini ascendant would be over here on the cusp of the 11th house. And so Aries would be there. So now Aries gets pulled in to the first house. So the Aquarius archetype of individuation, right? So part of your unique or innate way of being has an individuation part of it, which means I'm unique and I need to put myself in situations that can show me my uniqueness, which maybe means that I am part of things that resonate maybe for a period of time. And then I realize, no, this isn't doing it for me anymore. Right. So that can be part of your first house energy. The other part of the 11th house is groups and associations and serving humanity, right? So people close to you may just know you as you have this innate desire to contribute to humanity in a progressive way. Uranus, right? Uranus is also tied to technology and innovation. So add those keywords to it, right? So there's probably that kind of a flavoring to your personality and how you innately project. So that's how you can build layers to understand each one of these houses is better, right? So that example was just the first house, but you can go right around your chart. You can then go to the second house and say, what do I value? How is my self esteem going to be experienced, right? How do I feel about myself, right? So you can do the same exercise here with the second house and third house and the fourth house. Keep going around your wheel until you build this pretty complex structure of you, right? Which is like, okay, this is the energy that I'm working through in this lifetime, right? And so you can go right around the chart. Second house, what sign, step one, what sign is on the cusp? Step two, where is the ruler? House and sign. And I actually have another doc I'm going to bring up for this. Three is, if we're talking about the second house, where is Taurus? House and sign. And then the fourth house, what house cusp is Taurus on? Right. And all of that is going to color your second house. And so I have a doc that I'm just going to share real quickly, which is going to explain those steps to you. Okay. And after this, we're going to actually go into real charts, right? And we'll do this with real charts. But I just created this real quick because I thought this would be helpful. It's like, here's the 4 questions to ask. And it's kind of like fill in the blanks, right? So you can create this for yourself, or if there's a way for me to do it, I'll link this in the bottom of the description. I can probably share it there. So what sign is on the cusp of my first house? So I have a scenario here, right? Leo. I looked up a chart and Leo is on the cusp of my first house, right? Where is the ruler of that sign located? House and sign. So the ruler of Leo is the sun, right? So I looked for the sun and I found the sun in the 6th house, the Virgo house, in the sign of Capricorn. Okay, got it. Check. Then the third one, what house and sign does Mars occupy? Right? Because I'm looking at my first house here. So Mars ruling the first house. Well, I find my Mars, it's in the 3rd house, which is the Gemini house, and it's in the sign of Libra. Got it. Check. Then the last part of this, what house cusp is the sign of Aries located? Right? Aries related to the first house. I see that Aries is located on the cusp of the 9th house, the Sagittarius house. So now I'm combining all of this to say, who am I, right? How do I innately project to those closest to us? So I put this little summary here on the bottom and write, this is generic. It's not like I have a session with somebody and we can actually discuss how this energy is felt or expressed by them. But just looking at the archetypes, right? I put my natural expression is one of creativity and leadership, Capricorn plus Leo, with a strong analytical mind, Virgo 6th house, which is where my sun is. It's important for me to form many relationships, Libra, right? Where communication and learning takes place, Gemini 3rd house, right? So that's the Mars indicators, right? Mars was in my 3rd house, but it's in the sign of Libra. I will instinctively, right? Aries is instinctual. I will instinctively navigate towards experiences which will help me make sense of, explore, and learn about the meaning of life. 9th house, Sagittarius, which is the house that Aries is on the cusp of, right? So that's how this layering takes place. And like I said, I'll link this document in the description below. And so let's jump over to the examples. Okay, so I went into my Solar Fire software program and I'm like, okay, give me some examples. Let's do 3 examples, right? So the first example I got was Sheryl Crow. You should know Sheryl Crow, famous singer. And so let's do her first house, right? Just like we've been doing. So how does she innately project to those closest to her, right? And so she has Taurus over here on her ascendant. So step 1 is, what is the ruler of Taurus? That would be Venus. So where is Venus in her chart? She has Venus in Aquarius in the 11th house. So that gets pulled into the first house. That's step 1. And so a Venus in Aquarius figure and Taurus, right? So one of my videos may have been the video talking about the houses. I don't know. I talked about the symbol of Venus in Taurus being one that's seen often in singers, right? So she doesn't have a Venus in Taurus per se. She's got a Venus in Aquarius in the 11th house, which is thinking outside of the box and contributing to society. But that Venus does get pulled into her first house because she has a Taurus rising. So it's really like Venus and Taurus, right? And she's a singer. So there you go, right? So step one is already showing some stuff in her chart, right? About who she is. And so step two is to locate Mars. Where's Mars located? Oh, Mars is located in her 10th house, up in Aquarius again, right? So we take the 10th house and we pull that in the first. Well, people close to her would know her as somebody that's seen out in society. Wouldn't you agree? Right? So Mars out in Aquarius, he's got a unique presentation out in society. Check. Yeah, that gets pulled into the first house, right? And then we look and say, okay, well, where is Aries? So this is an interesting example because in the porphyry house system that I use, the way the houses are divided, there can be what's called intercepted signs, which means if you look on the outside of this wheel, I don't see Aries. There is no Aries anywhere, right? Well, Aries is really over here in the 12th house, but it's not on the border. It's actually encompassed in the 12th house for her. So her 12th house has Pisces, has Aries, and has a little bit of Taurus in it. So you take that archetype and that goes into the first house as well. And so Aries in the 12th house is the land of Pisces, right? Even though Aries archetype is there, that gets pulled into the first house. So artistic, right? Aries or Pisces energy can be spiritual. It can be blending energies with other people. It can be getting intuitive downloads, right? Or, think of her creating music or creating her own lyrics or unique ways to display her talent. 12th house, right? It could also mean when I see 12th house, a lot of times for me, it means she has to remove herself at times where she has to go off the grid, or maybe she's close to people for a long period of time. And then she's got to back up a little bit, right? And make sure she protects her energy. So that's part of 12th house territory, and that gets dragged into her first house. So there's one example for you with first house, right? Just going with this, I don't want to get into this in too depth, but let's quickly do relationships for her, right? And so I should have stated this in the beginning, but I'll state it now. This is just step two, right? There's much more we can add to this, right? Like what planets are in the first house for you? What planets are in these other houses that get pulled into the first house? Then what aspects are made to these planets, right? So there's a ton of layering that can get added on here. But this, at least this here, I'd say if you do the first part and then this part, that's a really good understanding of how these houses, the energy of these houses for you or other people, right? Just without even adding anything else. And so let's go to the 7th house for Cheryl Crow. And she's got Scorpio there, right? So Pluto is the ruler of Scorpio. So without even us going there, let's step it back to my other video. I'm going to have to attract to me Scorpio type energy, which means depth of experience, right? The natural psychologist or esoteric type things, or the understanding of death and life and rebirth and everything to do with Scorpio land, like the natural psychologist, right? So I'm going to have to go deeply and I'm going to have to attract people to me in relationships that bring to me Scorpio type energy. So I don't know her too well other than I like her singing and she's a singer, right? I don't know anything about her personal life or relationships, but she needs to attract Scorpio energy. So my guess typically with that is she's had some deeply impactful relationship experiences, just looking at Scorpio on the cusp of the 7th house, right? And so where's the ruler? Step two, where's Pluto? Pluto is in the fifth house. And so that fifth house, it's Pluto in Virgo in the fifth house. So that comes to the seventh house. Well, Pluto, from an evolutionary astrology perspective, in the fifth house is somebody, could be a good indicator of somebody in a past life who was famous. Fifth house, somebody who was seen out in society. So, probably for Sheryl Crow, this isn't her first go around in terms of being famous, right? And that gets pulled into the seventh house. And so you layer the Virgo archetype on top of that. The Pluto Virgo generation are healers, right? They are people that are able to help heal other people. Well, I would say part of her relationship is to heal people, right, through her music, through being seen in society. Pluto, fifth house, Venus up there in the 11th house, her Mars up in the 10th house, right? So relationships are going to be a vehicle, right? She's going to attract that energy, people maybe that can help her. And I'm sure she's collaborated with people that can help her bring her talents out into society in a way that's impactful, right? Then the next step of this is Venus. Where's Venus located, right? Because that's the natural ruler of the seventh house. Well, Venus is over here in Aquarius in the 11th house. So that pulls the Aquarius energy back into the seventh house, right? Having unique perspectives is going to be part of the relationships that she naturally pulls into her, right? Is thinking outside of the box. 11th house, contributing to society. She's probably met a lot of people in the 11th house territory, which is contributing to society, groups and associations. Sure, yes, check. Absolutely, I would say that is the case for her. Right. And then going back to the other concept of the seventh house, she projects Scorpio energy to the people she doesn't know, right? Which people could get drawn in to Scorpio energy, like, you are unique. You carry a specific energy. I want to get to know you better, right? So that's looking at Sheryl Crow's chart and pulling in stuff to her seventh house. And so let's go to my next example. That's right, Lady Gaga. So another female singer. So let's do the first house for her, right? I'm not going to keep going through the houses, but I'll do this example and one other one. So let's look at this. Lady Gaga, she's got Gemini on the cusp of her first house, right? So people would know her as Gemini energy, communicating, right? Being able to voice herself is part of how people would know her that's close to her. So all forms of communication, right? Could be writing, songwriting, like things like that. And so where's Mercury, right? Because Mercury rules Gemini. Mercury is here up in her 10th house. So that gets pulled in. It's up in her 10th house and it's in Pisces. 10th house, how she's seen in society, gets pulled into her first house. So that's just innate to her, right? Yes, she's definitely seen out in society and her communication skills are known out in society. Check. Pisces, right? Pisces energy, which is again that, water sign, emotional, creative, artistic, being able to feel people's energies, being outside the box type of energy, Piscean, emotional type energy. Check, gets pulled into the first house. Then we layer on top of this and we're like, okay, well, the next step is where is Mars? Mars is in Capricorn in the seventh house. So that gets pulled into her first house, right? So Capricorn energy, from an evolutionary astrology perspective, can have a few different interpretations to it. A Mars in Capricorn, and this is going a little deeper into the EA view of a Mars through the houses or through the signs, sorry. And I'm going to go into this in another video, but a Mars in Capricorn soul from an evolutionary astrology perspective is somebody that has experienced, but probably more than likely experienced heavy conditioning in a past lifetime. So that gets pulled into the first house. And so, what does that mean? That means that through her life experience, she is going to, like, part of her soul plan is to break free from any conditioning or being restricted or being stuck in any relationships, seventh house, right? And so, that's part of her evolution, and a big part of her evolution and her presentation of being here is Mars, Capricorn, first house. It's innately her, right? Breaking through any barriers and potentially helping others, seventh house, break through barriers for themselves, right? Mars, Capricorn. And then the next layer and the last layer is, where is Aries in this chart? Aries is right here. And oh, her sun is in Aries, right? Right towards the top of her chart. It's on the cusp of the 11th house, which is contributing to the larger whole, contributing to humanity, groups and associations. Venus is also in Aries, right up there with her north node, right? And that's a little deeper, but her Aries is on the cusp of the 11th house, and her sun is right there. That gets pulled into the first house. So Aries energy, it's instinctual for her to be out there in the public eye and to be contributing to humanity in some way. And she certainly has, right? With her music, right? And so here's the layering effects that we're seeing through these charts. And then the last one is, I think, Bill Gates. Yep, Bill Gates. So again, we'll stick with the first house because I think the first house is pretty impactful, right? If you just do your first house, you're going to start getting a lot of good information just by doing this on your first house or your seventh house, right? Relationships. That's the big things everyone's concerned with, is who am I and what relationships am I going to call to me and what do those relationships mean for me, right? So just, even just doing your first and seventh house would be good. So Bill Gates, let's look at Bill. So he's got Cancer on the cusp of his first house, right? And so where is the moon? Because the moon rules Cancer. So the moon is, oh, wow, it's up in his 10th house in Aries, right? So that moon gets pulled into the first house. It's really personal for him, moon in the first house, to contribute to society in some way. 10th house, his career is super important, right? It's just innate within him. He's going to naturally navigate to that area. I think that's accurate for Bill Gates. And then the next part of this is, where is Mars? Well, Mars is down here in Libra in the fourth house. So that gets pulled into the first house. So Mars in Libra, well, relationships, relating to people is going to be innate within him, is wanting to relate to people, right? Mars in Libra from an EA perspective is going to have to form a lot of different relationships so that they can know who they are, right? So Mars in Libra gets pulled into the first house for him. And Mars is in the fourth house, right? Which is the Cancer house, which is related to the moon, which is related to our ego structure, which goes into the first house for him. It's innate, right? Like, this is who I am, right? I relate to people. It's important for me to contribute out into society or be seen in society, especially with the moon in the 10th house. The moon's personal. It's important for me to be acknowledged in society. 10th house moon, right? And so then we look and say, okay, well, where is Aries? Well, the moon is in Aries, right? And I picked another chart where it's intercepted, right? So Aries is right here in his chart, up in the 10th house, right? So we already pulled the 10th house into the first, so we don't need to go any further. It's really important for him to be seen out in public and in society. Moon, 10th house, and relationships are really important. So here's the layering, right? So this is where you start adding some more depth to your interpretations. And you can do this you can go right around your chart: first house, second house, third house, fourth house, fifth house, sixth house, and go right around your chart and do this for each one of the houses. And you'll start painting a really eye-opening picture of your existence, right? Or if you do this for other people, you'll start understanding and being like, wow, yeah, this makes sense. I get it. And it starts helping you understand yourself and other people better. And so let me see here. Is there anything else? I've covered that. I think that wraps it up. So as always, thank you for being here, for checking this out. Hopefully this was helpful, and I will see you again in another video. Take care.